Hello. Welcome. The night is here. Everything around us is quiet now. Let's go on a special trip. It's not to a faraway place. It's to a time long ago. Tonight, we will learn about a special group of soldiers. Their name was the Janissaries. This name still sounds strong. It sounds like they were very good at what they did. This is a story for you to listen before you sleep. It will help improve your English level while you sleep. So, we will speak slowly. We will be gentle. We will not be fast. We will tell you important things, but we will tell them in a calm way. We hope this story helps you feel peaceful. The Janissaries were not like other soldiers. They were very special. They were the best. They worked for the Sultan. The Sultan was the leader of the Ottoman Empire. The Janissaries' story is about chances, strong training, and being part of a group. It started in a different way. Not on a battlefield. It started with a system. This system chose young boys. These boys would then serve the state. This system was called devshirme. Imagine a time when big empires needed strong armies. The Ottoman Empire was very good at organizing things. The Janissaries were very important for their power. They were brave. They were also very loyal to the Sultan for many years. In this quiet trip, we will see how these soldiers began. We will learn how young boys from different families became part of this strong group. We will look at their daily life. We will see their special rules. We will learn how they lived together. As time passed, their job changed. They were the Sultan's main protectors. But sometimes they also tried to change the Sultan's power. We will take each step slowly. Let the story come into your mind, like soft clouds moving in the sky. So, let your thoughts be calm. Let the old voices guide you. Get ready to learn about soldiers. People respected them. Sometimes people were afraid of them. They helped make one of the biggest empires in the world. The Janissaries are more than just a part of history. Their story shows us how power and loyalty can change over time. Let's start this calm trip together into the story of the Ottoman soldiers. Janissaries were very special soldiers. To understand them, we need to know about a system called devshirme. This was a big part of Ottoman history. In the early days of the Ottoman Empire, the sultans needed a strong army. They needed loyal soldiers. These soldiers had to be very good fighters. Also, the sultans wanted soldiers who would only be loyal to them. Not to a family leader, not to a tribe leader, only to the sultan. So the devshirme system started. It was a new idea. It was a way to get soldiers for the sultan's army. But it was different from other ways. The Ottoman Empire grew very fast. It conquered many lands. These lands had many different people. Many of these people were Christian. The devshirme system would take young Christian boys from these lands. Not all boys, just some. These boys would leave their families. They would come to the Ottoman capital, Istanbul. It sounds sad to leave home, right? But for some, it was also a chance. It was a chance for a new life. A chance to be part of something big. The idea behind devshirme was to create a special group of servants. These servants would be called kul. This word means servant or slave in a special way. It meant they belonged to the Sultan. They were loyal only to him. They did not have other strong family ties in the Ottoman lands. This made them very dependable. The Sultan could trust them a lot. These boys were chosen carefully. They were often strong and smart. They would get the best training. They would learn many things. They would learn how to fight. They would learn about the Ottoman way of life. They would also learn about Islam, the religion of the Ottoman Empire. This system helped the Ottoman Empire become very powerful. It gave them an army that was strong and loyal, an army that helped the Sultan rule many lands. The Devshirme was a very important part of how the Janissaries came to be. It was the first step on their long and special journey. We just learned about the Devshirme system. Now, let's talk about how the boys were chosen. This was a very important part. It was a big moment for them. It changed their lives forever. Every few years, Ottoman officers would travel. They went to Christian villages. These villages were mostly in the Balkan lands. That's a part of Europe. The officers were looking for young boys. These boys were usually between 8 and 18 years old. The officers looked for certain things. They wanted boys who were strong, boys who were healthy. They also looked for smart boys. They thought about how brave the boys seemed. They wanted boys who looked like they could learn many things. It was a very strict process. The officers had rules. They could not take the only son from a family. They also could not take married boys, or boys who spoke Turkish already. They wanted boys who were fresh. This means boys who had not learned too much about the outside world yet. Imagine a village. The Ottoman officers arrive. They visit each family. They look at the boys. It must have been a very hard day for the families. Parents had to say goodbye to their sons. It was sad. But sometimes parents knew it was also a chance for their son, a chance for a better life, a chance to work for the Sultan. After the boys were chosen, their journey started. It was a long journey. They walked to the Ottoman capital, Istanbul. Istanbul was a big city. It was far from their small villages. This was their first big test. It was a test of strength. It was a test of courage. During this journey, the boys were always watched. They traveled in groups. They learned about each other. They started to build new friendships. They left their old lives behind. They left their old names. They left their old families. They were beginning a new life, a new identity. They were going to become servants of the Sultan. They were going to become Janissaries. This journey was hard, but it was the start of something big. For these young boys, it was the first step into a powerful new world. A world they never knew existed before. They were going from simple village life to the heart of a great empire. They were ready for their new training and a very different future. The young boys had finished their long journey to Istanbul. Now their new life would truly begin. They were taken to a special place. This place was called the Asemi Oka. We can call it the apprentice barracks. It was their first home in their new world. Here, the boys started their basic training. This training was not yet about fighting. It was about learning a new way of life. It was about discipline. This means learning to follow rules, learning to do things in a very organized way. They learned to wake up early. They learned to eat together. They learned to clean. They learned to work hard. The boys also started to learn about Islam. This was a very important part of their new life. They would learn the prayers. They would learn the stories of Islam. They would learn how to be a Muslim. After some time, these boys would become Muslim. This was a big change for them. It gave them a new identity. They were no longer just boys from their old villages. They were now new members of the Ottoman world. This time in the Asemi Ocha was also about physical training. They would do exercises. They would run. They would become strong. They needed strong bodies for the future. But most importantly, They learned to be obedient. They learned to follow orders without asking why. This was key for a soldier. Imagine these young boys. They came from different places. They spoke different languages at first. But in the Asemi Oka, they started to become one group. They learned the same language, Turkish. They ate the same food. They wore the same clothes. They were taught to see each other as brothers. They were all now cool, servants of the Sultan. Some boys showed special skills. Maybe they were very smart. Maybe they learned very quickly. These boys might get a different chance. They might go to the Enderun school inside the palace. This was a very high-level school. It prepared them to be leaders or important people in the government. But most of the boys stayed in the Asemi Ocha. They prepared to become Janissaries. This first training period was very important. It changed the boys. It made them strong in body and mind. It gave them a new religion and a new name. It shaped them into loyal future soldiers. They were ready for the next big step in their journey. They were ready to become part of the great Ottoman army. We talked about the Asemi Oka, where most boys got their first training. But some boys were very special. They were very smart or showed great talent. These boys did not go to the regular army path. They went to a palace school. This school was called Enderun. Young boys entered the Devshirme system. Their lives changed a lot. This system also changed the Ottoman Empire. It changed its society and culture. It brought new people into the empire's heart. First, the Devshirme helped many people find a new place in society. These boys, who were once outside the main Ottoman life, now became very important. They learned Turkish. They became Muslim. They learned Ottoman customs. They became part of the system. This was a way for people to move up in life. A boy from a poor village could become a rich general or a wise leader. This was a big chance for many families. The system also helped the Ottoman Empire to be strong. It created a group of people who were loyal only to the Sultan. They had no strong family ties or old group loyalties inside the empire. This made them very dependable. They worked hard for the Sultan and the state. But there were also cultural changes. When boys from different lands came, they brought some parts of their old cultures. Over time, these parts mixed with Ottoman culture. This made the Ottoman culture richer and more diverse. For example, some building styles or art forms might have seen new ideas from these areas. However, the Devshirme system was not easy for everyone. Families lost their sons. It was a sad moment. For the boys, it meant leaving everything they knew behind: their language, their religion, their family names. They had to start completely fresh. This created a new identity for them. They were not just from their birth village anymore. They were now Ottomans, servants of the Sultan. Over the years, the Devshirme system helped the empire grow and stay strong. It gave the Sultan a special army and smart leaders. These people were skilled and fully dedicated. They helped the Ottoman Empire become one of the most powerful states in the world for many centuries. So, the Devshirme was more than just a way to get soldiers. It was a powerful tool that shaped people's lives. It shaped the Ottoman Empire's future. It helped mix different groups of people into one big, strong state. It was a unique system that left a deep mark on history. The young boys from Asemi Ocha had learned a lot. They were stronger now. They understood the new way of life. They were ready for the next big step. This step was to become real Janissaries. This was a very important moment for them. They had finished their basic training. Now they would join the Janissary course. This was the main army group. It was a day of pride. It was a day of new beginnings. The boys took part in a special ceremony. It was a big event. All the other Janissaries were there. The leaders of the corps were there too. This ceremony showed that they were now accepted. They were part of the special family of Janissaries. During the ceremony, they took an oath. An oath is a very serious promise. They promised to be loyal to the Sultan. They promised to serve the Ottoman Empire with all their strength. They promised to follow orders. They promised to be brave. This oath was for life. It meant they would fight for the Sultan until they died. Imagine them standing there. They were young men now, no longer small boys. Their faces were serious. They knew this promise was very important. They were now cool of the Sultan in a new way. They were his personal soldiers. They were his best and most trusted fighters. After the oath, they got their new uniforms. These uniforms were special. They had a unique hat called a burk. It was a tall, white felt hat. This hat made them easy to see. It showed that they were Janissaries. It was a symbol of their new rank and their new life. They also received their weapons. Their most famous weapon was the yataghan. It was a short, curved sword. They also got a place in a orta. An orta was like a company or a unit in the army. Each orta had its own number and its own special sign. This was their new military family. They would live, train, and fight with the men in their orta. Becoming a Janissary meant a lot. It meant they had a high status. They had a good life. They received regular pay. They had special food. They had good clothes. They were powerful. People respected them. But with this power came great responsibility. They had to be ready to fight any time the Sultan needed them. So, the oath ceremony was not just a show. It was a deep promise. It changed them from young trainees to loyal, strong, and feared soldiers. They were now ready to protect the Sultan. They were ready to expand the empire. They were the Janissaries. The Janissaries were a very organized army. They were not just a big group of soldiers. They had a clear structure. This means they had different parts and different leaders. This helped them work well together. The main unit in the Janissary Corps was called an orta. Think of an orta like a company in a modern army. Each orta had its own number. It also had its own special sign or flag. There were many ortas in the Janissary Corps. Each orta had about 100 to 200 soldiers. They lived together in their barracks called odalar. Inside each orta, there were different ranks. Ranks are like different levels of leaders. Each rank had a special name and special duties. The highest leader of the whole Janissary Corps was the Janissary A. He was a very powerful man. He was directly under the Sultan. He managed all the Janissaries. He was in charge of their training, their pay, and their discipline. Below the A, there were other important leaders. One important leader was the çorbaçı. This word means soup maker in Turkish. This name came from the time when Janissaries shared their food from big soup pots. The çorbaçı was the commander of an orta. He was like a captain. He was responsible for his soldiers. Then there was the odabaşı. This means head of the room. He was a lower leader. He helped the çorbaçı. He was in charge of a smaller group of soldiers inside the orta. He made sure they followed rules and did their duties. Other ranks included people who took care of food, weapons, or other needs. Everyone had a job. Everyone knew their place. This strong order made the Janissaries a very effective fighting force. The Janissaries had a unique way of life. They lived in barracks in Istanbul and other big cities. These barracks were like big homes for soldiers. They trained together, they ate together, they slept together. This close living made them feel like a big family. They called each other Kardesh, brother. This bond was very strong. It made them fight bravely for each other. Their organization was special. It was different from many other armies of that time. It helped them stay disciplined. It helped them move fast. It helped them win many battles for the Ottoman Empire. They were a well-oiled machine, ready to follow the Sultan's command. Now, let's look at the daily life of a Janissary. What did they do every day? Where did they live? Their life was very organized. It was full of rules and training. Janissaries lived in special buildings called barracks. These were big places in cities like Istanbul. Each orta, company, had its own part of the barracks. These parts were called odalar, rooms. Many Janissaries lived together in one oda. It was like a big shared home. Their day started very early. They woke up with the sun. First, they would pray. Then they would have a simple breakfast. After that, their training began. Training was very important. They practiced using their weapons. They learned to shoot their guns. They learned to use their yatagan, sword. They practiced marching and moving together. They needed to be fast and strong. They needed to work as one. This training made them very good soldiers. They also did other jobs. Sometimes they helped with building. Sometimes they helped keep order in the city. They were not always fighting. They also had duties in peacetime. Meal times were special. They ate together in a big room. Their main food was often a kind of soup or stew. The kazan, big cooking pot, was very important. It was a symbol of their unity. If the Janissaries turned over their kazan, it meant they were unhappy. It meant they were ready to protest or even revolt. In the afternoon, they might continue training, or they might have some free time. During free time, they could talk. They could play games. They could read. They could visit friends. But they always had to follow the rules of the barracks. Discipline was always key. They had special customs. For example, they often had a beard, but they shaved their mustache. This was a unique look for them. It made them different from other people. Throughout the year, their routine stayed mostly the same. But when there was a war, everything changed. They would get ready to leave the barracks. They would march with the Sultan's army. They would go to far lands to fight. When they were not at war, their life in the barracks was about staying ready, staying strong, staying loyal. The Janissaries' daily life was hard, but it also gave them a strong sense of brotherhood. They lived, trained, and ate together. This made them a very strong and loyal fighting force for the Ottoman Empire. They were always prepared to serve the Sultan. The Janissaries were very good soldiers. They were strong. They were brave. But they also had special weapons and smart tactics. Tactics are ways to fight a battle. These things made them a very strong part of the Ottoman army. First, let's talk about their weapons. In the early days, Janissaries used bows and arrows. They were very skilled archers. But over time, new weapons came. The Janissaries were among the first armies to use firearms. These were guns. They used muskets, which were long guns. This was a big change in fighting. Guns were loud. They were powerful. They also carried a special sword. It was called a yataghan. This was a short sword with a curved blade. It was good for close fighting. They also had knives and sometimes small axes. Their gear was chosen to be useful in different fighting situations. The Janissaries were known for their discipline. This means they followed orders very well. In a battle, this was very important. They moved together. They shot together. This made their attacks very strong. They used smart tactics. For example, they were very good at sieges. A siege is when an army surrounds a city or a castle. They try to take it over. Janissaries were good at using cannons. They could break down city walls. They also dug tunnels under walls to make them fall. When fighting in the open field, they were also very effective. They would often form a strong line. They would fire their muskets together. This made a wall of bullets. It was very scary for other armies. After they fired, they might charge forward with their yataghans. This mix of guns and close combat was very strong. The Janissaries also fought alongside other parts of the Ottoman army. They worked with the cavalry, who were soldiers on horses. They worked with the artillery, who used big cannons. The Janissaries were often in the center of the army. They were the main attacking force. Their uniforms were also special. They had their unique white felt hats, the burq. This made them easy to see and recognize on the battlefield. It also showed their special status. So, the Janissaries were a powerful force, not just because they were brave, but because they used new weapons. They used smart fighting plans, and they were very disciplined. They were the true main power of the Ottoman Empire for a long time. They helped the Sultan win many wars and make the empire big. When the Janissaries marched to war, they did not just walk quietly. They had special music. This music was played by a group called Mater. Mater was the world's first military band. It was very loud and very powerful. The Mater band played many different instruments. They had big drums. These drums made a deep, strong sound. They also had zurnas, which are like loud trumpets. They had cymbals, which make a sharp, crashing sound. And they had bells. All these instruments played together made a unique sound. Imagine hearing this music from far away. Boom, boom, boom went the drums. The zurnas cried out. It was a sound that could make your heart beat fast. For the Ottoman soldiers, this music gave them courage. It made them feel strong. It made them ready to fight. But for the enemy, the Mater music was different. It was scary. When they heard the sound, they knew the mighty Ottoman army was coming. They knew the Janissaries were near. This music was a kind of mind war. It made the enemy feel afraid even before the fighting started. It made them lose hope. Mater music was played not only in war, it was also played during important events. When the Sultan went out, Mater played. When there was a victory, Mater played. It was a symbol of Ottoman power and glory. The music had a special rhythm. It was often slow and strong at first. Then it became faster and more exciting. This made people feel strong emotions. It was not just noise, it was planned music. The Janissaries loved their Mater. It was part of their identity. The sound of Mater was the sound of the Ottoman Empire's strength. It was a sign that this strong army was here. Over time, Mater music became famous in other countries too. Some European armies even started to use similar instruments. They wanted to have music that felt as strong as Mater. So, Mater was more than just music. It was a key part of the Janissaries' power. It helped their own soldiers. It scared their enemies. It was a strong voice for the Ottoman Empire. It showed the world that a mighty force was on the march. The Janissaries were very strong soldiers. We know this, but over time they became more than just fighters. They gained a lot of political power. This means they started to have a say in how the country was run. The Janissaries lived very close to the Sultan. Their barracks were often near the palace in Istanbul. This closeness was important. The Sultan saw them often. He relied on them for protection. Because they were so close and so strong, they started to have a special influence. They could talk to the Sultan. They could share their ideas. Sometimes they even tried to tell the Sultan what to do. They became a group that the Sultan had to listen to. This was a new thing. In the beginning, they were only soldiers. But now they were also political players. For example, sometimes the Janissaries did not like a Grand Vizier. A Grand Vizier was like the Sultan's main helper or prime minister. If the Janissaries did not like him, they might protest. They might even demand that the Sultan fire him. And many times the Sultan had to agree. Why? Because the Janissaries were too strong to ignore. They had many soldiers. They were very united. This power made the Janissaries very important. They could help choose who got high jobs in the government. They could influence big decisions for the empire. This showed that their loyalty to the Sultan was still there, but their own interests were growing too. Their influence was not always bad. Sometimes they helped keep the government strong. They made sure that no one outside the palace could easily challenge the Sultan. But sometimes their power made problems. If they did not like a rule, they could stop it. If they wanted something, they could demand it. This change happened slowly, over many years. As the Ottoman Empire became bigger, the Janissaries' role also grew. They were still great fighters, but their voice in the empire's matters became louder and louder. They were not just the Sultan's guards. They were becoming a force that even the Sultan had to be careful with. This was a big change in their story. At the start, Janissaries had very strict rules. One very important rule was that they could not marry. They could not have families of their own. This rule was there for a reason. It made them loyal only to the Sultan. Their only family was the Janissary Corps. Their only home was their barracks. But over many years, things began to change. The Ottoman Empire was at peace more often. The Janissaries were not always fighting wars. Life in the barracks became less strict. Slowly, the rule about marriage started to loosen. First, some older Janissaries were allowed to marry. Then, more and more asked for this right. Finally, the rule was changed. Janissaries could now marry and have children. This was a big change for the corps. Because they could marry, their children often wanted to join the Janissary Corps too. So, the Devshirme system, which brought in new boys from outside, was used less. Instead, the Corps started to take in sons of Janissaries. It also started to take in other people who just wanted the good pay and special rights. People who were not trained through Devshirme entered the Corps. This change had some bad effects. When Janissaries had families, their loyalty started to divide. They still loved the Sultan, but now they also had their own wives and children to think about. They wanted to protect their families. This made them less ready to go to far-off wars. It made them less willing to risk their lives. Also, the discipline inside the corps became weaker. The new Janissaries were not always trained as well as the old ones. They were not chosen as carefully. Some just bought their way into the corps to get the good pay and tax-free life. They did not care as much about being good soldiers. The Janissaries started to spend more time on their own businesses. They became merchants or craftsmen. They cared more about making money than about military training. The strong, disciplined soldiers slowly became more like a city group with special rights. This change made the Janissary Corps weaker from the inside. They were still powerful in the city, but their skills as soldiers were not as good. This was a big problem for the Ottoman Empire. The very strong army that helped the empire grow was now changing. It was slowly losing its special power and discipline. The Janissaries were very powerful. They had a special place in the Ottoman Empire. But, as we learned, their rules changed. Their discipline became weaker, and their power grew very big. This led to a new problem. The Janissaries started to revolt often. A revolt is when a group of people rise up against their leaders. The Janissaries did this many times. They were unhappy with different things. Sometimes they were unhappy with their pay. Sometimes they did not like a new rule, or they did not like the Grand Vizier, the Sultan's main helper. When they were unhappy, they would show it. A common way was to turn over their soup pots, kazan. The kazan was a symbol of their unity and their food. Turning it over meant they were very angry. It meant they were ready to protest. These revolts often happened in Istanbul, the capital city. The Janissaries were there. They were many. They were armed. So their protests could become very dangerous. They could march to the palace. They could demand changes. Imagine the fear in the city when the Janissaries revolted. Shops would close. People would stay inside their homes. The Sultan and his helpers would try to calm them down. Sometimes the Sultan had to give in to their demands. He would fire a Grand Vizier, or he would give them more pay. This showed that the Janissaries had too much power. They could even challenge the Sultan directly. One famous type of Janissary revolt was the Kazancha revolts. This name comes from the soup pots. These revolts happened many times over the years. They made the Ottoman government unstable. It was hard for the sultans to make big changes or new plans, because they always had to worry about the Janissaries. These revolts also showed that the Janissaries were no longer just soldiers. They were a powerful political group. They used their military strength to get what they wanted. This was not good for the empire in the long run. An army should serve the state, not rule it. So the frequent revolts were a clear sign. The Janissary Corps was changing. It was not the same loyal and disciplined force it once was. Their power grew too much, and this power became a problem for the very empire they were meant to protect. The Janissaries had a special place in Ottoman society. They were not just soldiers. They also had many benefits and special rights. These were economic benefits, meaning they made money or saved money in special ways. One big benefit was their regular pay. They received money from the Sultan. This pay was good and steady. It was much better than what many other people earned. This made being a Janissary a good job. They also had special tax exemptions. This means they did not have to pay some taxes that other people paid. This saved them money. It made their lives easier. These special rights were given to them because they were servants of the Sultan. Over time, many Janissaries started to do other jobs. They became craftsmen. They worked as merchants in the markets. They opened shops. They used their free time and their special status to earn more money. This was against the old rules. In the past, Janissaries were only soldiers, but now they mixed military life with business. This mix caused problems. Janissaries started to care more about their businesses than about their military training. They did not practice as much. They did not want to go to war far away. They just wanted to stay in the city and manage their shops. How did people in society see the Janissaries? It was a mix of feelings. People respected them because they were powerful. They were the Sultan's special soldiers. But sometimes people also feared them, especially when the Janissaries revolted or caused trouble in the city. The Janissaries often lived in special areas in cities. They had their own barracks and communities. This made them a strong group inside the city. They were powerful both in the palace and in the streets. Their economic power grew. They became a rich and strong group. They used their military power to keep their benefits. If the government tried to take away their benefits, they might protest. They might even revolt. So, the Janissaries were not just a military force. They were also a very important economic group. Their special rights and businesses changed their role. They became more connected to city life and trade. This big change in their economic life also changed who they were as soldiers. It made them less like the disciplined fighting force of the past and more like a powerful guild or union. Janissaries helped the Ottoman Empire grow very big, but like all things, their power started to decline. This means they became weaker over time. Many things caused this decline. One big reason was their resistance to change. The world was changing fast. Armies in Europe started to use new weapons. They used new ways of fighting. The Ottoman Empire needed to change too. But the Janissaries did not want to. They were happy with their old ways. They did not want to learn new things. They did not want to use new guns or new tactics. This made them fall behind other armies. Another reason was the loss of discipline. In the beginning, Janissaries were very strict. They followed all rules. But over time, this changed. As we learned, they started to marry. They had families. They started businesses. They cared less about their military duties. They did not train as hard. They were not as ready for war. This made them weaker soldiers. Also, corruption grew inside the corps. Corruption means people used their power in a bad way, often for money. People could buy their way into the Janissary Corps. They did not have to be good soldiers. They just paid money. This meant that many new Janissaries were not strong or loyal. They just wanted the benefits. This made the whole corps weaker. The Janissaries also gained too much political power. They often challenged the Sultan. They caused many revolts. This made the government unstable. When the army controls the government, it is hard to lead the country well. The sultans could not make important changes easily. They were afraid of the Janissaries' anger. Imagine a big tree. At first, it is very strong, but if its roots get sick or it stops growing, it becomes weak. The Janissary Corps was like this tree. Its old rules, its strict training, and its full loyalty were like its strong roots. When these things changed, the tree became weaker. So the Janissaries, who were once the pride of the Ottoman army, became a problem. They were not as good at fighting. They were hard to control. They stopped the empire from becoming modern. These problems meant that a big change was coming. The Sultan would have to find a way to make the army strong again. And this would mean a very big decision for the Janissaries. As the Janissaries became weaker, the Ottoman Empire saw a problem. The army was not as strong as before. Other countries had modern armies. So, some sultans tried to make big changes. They wanted to make the Ottoman army modern too. These changes were called reforms. One important sultan who tried this was Sultan Selim III. He saw that the Janissaries were not good enough anymore. He wanted a new army. He called this new army Nizam-Jadid. This means new order. He wanted this new army to be like the modern armies in Europe. They would have new training. They would use new guns. But the Janissaries did not like this idea. They did not want a new army. They did not want to change. They liked their old ways. They liked their special rights. They were powerful. They did not want to lose their power. So they resisted these reforms. They said no to the Sultan's plans. Imagine the Sultan trying to build something new. But a very strong group, the Janissaries, kept pulling it down. They were afraid of losing their place. They were afraid of what new changes would mean for them. The Janissaries even started revolts against sultans who tried to bring reforms. They often won these fights. For example, Sultan Selim III faced a big Janissary revolt. Sadly, because of their strong resistance, he had to stop his plans for the new army. He even lost his life because of these problems. This showed how much power the Janissaries had. They could stop the Sultan himself. They stopped the empire from becoming modern. This made the Ottoman Empire fall even further behind other countries. Other sultans also tried. They knew the empire needed change. They knew the Janissaries were a problem. But it was very hard to fight against them. The Janissaries had been there for hundreds of years. They were deeply rooted in the system. So, the story of reforms was a sad one for a long time. The sultans wanted to make the empire strong again. They wanted to build a modern army. But the Janissaries stood in their way. Their resistance was very strong. This made the situation very difficult for the Ottoman Empire's future. It showed that a big, final decision would need to be made about the Janissaries. After many years of problems with the Janissaries, a new sultan came to power. His name was Sultan Mahmud II. He was a very strong and smart leader. He saw that the Ottoman Empire needed big changes. He knew that the Janissaries were stopping the empire from becoming modern. Sultan Mahmud II understood something important. The armies in Europe were now very strong. They had new weapons and new ways of fighting. The Janissaries, with their old ways, could not win against them anymore. So the Sultan decided he must build a new army, a modern army. He started to plan carefully. He did not rush. He learned from the mistakes of past sultans. He knew that the Janissaries would fight against any change. They had stopped reforms before. They had even taken down sultans who tried to modernize. So, Sultan Mahmud II worked secretly at first. He started to train small groups of new soldiers. These soldiers learned new ways of fighting. They used modern guns. They wore new uniforms. This was the start of his new military force. He knew he needed an army that was loyal only to him, not to old traditions. He also worked to get support from other groups. He talked to religious leaders. He talked to other parts of the army. He wanted people to understand why the old Janissary system had to change. He showed them that the empire's future was in danger if they did not modernize. The Sultan's wish was clear. He wanted the Ottoman Empire to be strong again. He wanted it to stand equally with other big countries. And for this to happen, the Janissary problem had to be solved. They were like a very old, heavy chain on the empire. Sultan Mahmud II was very brave. He knew this plan was dangerous. The Janissaries were still many. They were still armed. But the Sultan decided it was time. He believed that the empire could not move forward with the Janissaries in their old form. His preparations were long and careful. He gathered his power. He gathered his new forces. He waited for the right moment. He was ready to make a very big decision. A decision that would change the Ottoman Empire forever. This decision would be the end of the Janissary story, and the start of a new military era for the Ottomans. We have learned that Sultan Mahmud II wanted a modern army. He knew the Janissaries were stopping the empire from moving forward. He made his plans carefully. He waited for the right time. That time came in 1826. It was a very important year for the Ottoman Empire. Sultan Mahmud II gave an order. He said that the Janissaries must start new training. They had to train like the modern armies in Europe. This was a direct order. The Sultan wanted to see if they would obey. But the Janissaries said no. They did not want this new training. They did not want to change their old ways. So they did what they had done many times before. They revolted. They turned over their soup pots. They marched out of their barracks. They started to cause trouble in Istanbul. But this time it was different. Sultan Mahmud II was ready. He had his new, loyal army. He also had the support of many people. Religious leaders and common people were tired of the Janissaries' power and problems. The fighting began in Istanbul. It was a big and sad event. The Janissaries were brave fighters, but they were not organized like before. They were also fighting against a well-prepared new army. Sultan Mahmud II's forces fought back strongly. They used cannons. They surrounded the Janissaries' barracks. This event is called Vaka-i-Hayriye. In English, it means the auspicious incident, or the fortunate event. It was auspicious because it was good for the future of the Ottoman Empire. It removed a big problem. The fighting was hard. Many Janissaries lost their lives. After a few days, the Janissary Corps was completely destroyed. Sultan Mahmud II ordered that the Janissary Corps should be abolished. This means it was ended forever. Their barracks were taken down. Their special hats and symbols were no longer seen. This was a huge moment in Ottoman history. It was a turning point. For hundreds of years, the Janissaries had been the heart of the Ottoman army. Now they were gone. It was a hard and sad end for them. But it opened the door for the Ottoman Empire to modernize. After the Janissaries were gone, Sultan Mahmud II could build his new army. He could make many other reforms. He could make the empire stronger and more like the modern world. The Vaka-i-Hayriye was a painful but necessary step for the Ottoman Empire's future. We have reached the end of our journey tonight. We have traveled through many years. We have learned the story of the Janissaries. They were a very important group in the Ottoman Empire. Their story is full of strong beginnings, great power, and finally, a big change. At first, the Janissaries were the best soldiers. They were loyal only to the Sultan. They helped the Ottoman Empire become very big and strong. They won many battles. They used new weapons. They were disciplined. They were a special and feared army. Their unique system, devshirme, brought young boys and trained them to be the Sultan's servants. This was a very new idea for its time. But as time passed, things changed. The Janissaries started to get more power. They could marry. They started businesses. Their discipline became weaker. They did not want to change with the world. They even started to revolt against the sultans. This made problems for the empire. They stopped the Ottoman Empire from becoming modern. Finally, Sultan Mahmud II made a very hard but important decision. In 1826, he ended the Janissary course. This was called Vaka-i-Hayriya. It was a sad end for them, but it opened a new door. It allowed the Ottoman Empire to build a new, modern army. It helped the empire try to catch up with other big countries. So, what is the legacy of the Janissaries? Legacy means what they left behind. They left behind a long history. They showed how a unique army could be built. They showed how strong discipline could be. But they also showed that even the strongest groups must change when the world changes. If they do not change, they can be left behind. Their story is a lesson. It tells us that nothing stays the same forever. Even great power can fade. But the memory of the Janissaries still lives on. We remember them as brave warriors. We remember them as a unique part of Ottoman history. They helped shape an empire that lasted for hundreds of years. As the quiet night continues, we hope this journey into the past has been peaceful for you. The echoes of the Janissaries, their drums, their battles, and their story now gently fade. They are a part of history, a part of our quiet thoughts tonight. Thank you for joining us on this journey. We wish you a very peaceful sleep. May your dreams be calm and restful, filled with the quiet contemplation of history.